Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here, and welcome to another entry in our Tournament Cast series. So this is actually game one in the finals of the Total Warhammer Cup, and we're going to have a matchup between the Empire and Bretonnia. So the Empire is going to be piloted by Viking Cat, and he's going to be facing off against Soothsayer, who is going to be playing Bretonnia. So those are actually just shortened versions of their names. However, you will see their full names in the results screen after the match is over. So as far as the army compositions go, let's get started with the Empire. So for the Empire, he actually has a little bit of a diverse firing line right here. So he has crossbowmen, and crossbowmen, again, will trade somewhat efficiently with the Bretonnian missiles, so I definitely like the inclusion of those guys. And I also like kind of mixing in some handgunners as well, because again, handgunners do have that armor piercing, so against the the cav and the flying troops, and again, you're usually going to see Pegasus Knights, a Lord here who does have 80 armor. The Pegasus Knights over here do have 80 armor as well, and of course, I'm sure he has some Knights of the Realm and some other tricks in the back who, again, also have, not the highest armor as it pertains to armored units, but again, they have some armor, so having that AP right here with the handgunners is going to be very, very efficient at trading with lords and flying units and cav and all that kind of stuff. And having the crossbowmen, again, gives you a tool to kind of trade with the peasant bowmen. So I definitely like this front line, definitely like the kind of hybrid build here. In the secondary line here, we have flagellants. So flagellants and swordsmen honestly are enough to trade with most Bretonnian front lines. Granted, foot squires will be able to beat down flagellants pretty well with their armor, but Sigmar's sons are an incredible choice. So it looks like he does have swordsmen, flagellants, and yeah, that's pretty much it for this front line here. So Sigmar's sons, they're just an incredible unit, and even in matchups where you want to bring like more traditional AP, I think these guys are worth bringing simply because one, they're unbreakable, but two, they have incredible combat stats. They have 43 melee attack and 43 melee defense, which is very, very high. So I like this inclusion. Flagellants, they trade well with, most of the men-at-arms. They trade well with the spears, the halberds, and they even do okay against foot squires. I mean, it's not terrible. They come in huge numbers, and they're unbreakable. I definitely like the pick of his frontline troops here. On top of that, he actually did decide to get Boris Todbringer as well. He does, of course, have the Runefang here, which gives him that regeneration. And again, that is, in my opinion, what makes him more competitive than Karl Franz, is the fact that he does have this. Bit of an interesting choice, not putting him on a mount. He will, be running around. I guess he's not as big of a target, because again, you can't really afford, unless you really, really want to play that game and go all out, to kind of fight Bretonnia in the air, because the Pegasus Knights are just too strong. The Royal Pegasus Knights, they hit extremely hard. They have 61 weapon strength and a huge anti-large bonus as well. So you really don't want to play that game, but having him on foot is a bit of a bold move for sure. But we'll see how it plays out. So in the back line, it looks like he does have the Tattersouls. He has a single mortar. Now, I normally don't like mortars, but I think they're a decent pick against Bretonnia because of the blobbed nature of their infantry and kind of how they bring a lot of low-tier fodder type units. So definitely a cool choice there. Eager to see how they perform, and you can see they're already taking some rounds. In the back line, he does have several lines of spears, which I think is a great choice at protecting, the mortar and, the other squishy targets, because what he'll probably end up doing once the engagement starts is pulling these guys back behind the infantry line. So having all these spears and auxiliary to help out is quite nice. And on top of that, he does have Demogryph Knights with halberds and the Royal Altdorf Gryphites. So definitely some fun stuff. I like his build quite a bit. And let's get to the Bretonnian player. And before we keep going, guys, this is actually a custom map called the Vampire Pit. I'm sure some of you guys were wondering, what the heck is this map? I've never seen it before. But again, it is a custom map that this tournament uses. So as far as the Bretonnian army goes, he decided to just get a standard lord, so definitely going a little bit wider, trying to save some money, pinch some pennies. Aside from that, he does have Royal Pegasus Knights as well as a regular group of Pegasus Knights. So the difference being about 10, is it 10 weapon strength? No, it's only about like 6. But again, there are some other stat differentials with 42 melee attack on these and 32. So that's actually a pretty big difference. And on top of that, these guys do have the Living Saints ability, which essentially makes them immune to fatigue, which is so powerful in these long battles. So aside from that, he has a very, very Bretonnian army. So he actually has peasant blobs here. It looks like he does have some battle pilgrims. And battle pilgrims are kind of like flagellants in many ways. They're, relatively not as squishy as flagellants, but again, they're not unbreakable, but they have excellent leadership. The foot squires did get their leadership nerfed down to a base of 60, so battle pilgrims have substantially higher leadership now. And I like these guys in a bunch of different matchups. I like them versus Empire, I like them versus Beastmen, I like them versus Greenskins, just kind of mixing them in. Really good, pretty good weapon strength at 35, great leadership. They do have a frenzy, so they are immune to psychology while their frenzy mechanic is active. So just a great unit all around. Definitely like him quite a bit. So he's got a whole front line of those guys. He's got some spearmen and arms over here. It looks like he just has standard peasant bowmen. It looks like he does have 1, 2, 3 groups. So it's definitely gonna. Oh no, he actually has 4. So he's gonna be able to out trade the crossbowmen. But again, the Empire player does have handgunners, which will be very efficient against the cav. But I would still give a slight edge as far as just like atricious trading in terms of missile fire to the Bretonnian player. He does, of course, have a damsel with the lore of life, some halberds and spears in the back, Knights of the Realm, and of course those Pegasi. So very good stuff. My apologies for the long-winded introduction. I feel like the funds might be a little bit larger for this game, but again, maybe that was the structure of the tournament. And also, before we get started, guys, I'd like to sincerely thank Shetland Apache, of course, for sending me these replays. He does run those tournaments. So you can see the mortar fire coming down right now. It hasn't made that great contact yet, but it did some decent HP damage to these battle pilgrims. Hasn't killed any models yet, however. So if he decides to use Lore of Life or, focus in on this group, they will be able to heal up to the full extent. So over here, again, those mortars, and let's go ahead and see if they actually got any kills. It doesn't look like they got any kills yet, but mortars are extremely inaccurate. And the Bretonnian player actually isn't too bunched up, because a lot of people, like myself included, will do fairly boxy formations, but he actually went very, very wide here. And you can see the peasant bowmen are trading in with those crossbowmen over there, and the crossbowmen have 160 range, and what is it? So it's 160 apiece, but he still has an excellent concave. So for any of you guys who've played StarCraft or other RTSs like that, the principle of a concave is very, very important. Essentially, it's like when you form a semicircle or an arc of fire where you can focus multiple groups on a single group and that you kind of pit them in. So right here, you can see these crossbowmen are taking massive gunfire, but the mortars are retaliating and make great contact with those peasant bowmen over there, put their leadership to -17. And they are indeed getting routed off here. So pretty good trading back and forth. That mortar definitely starting to pay for itself. And you can see the Empire front line is advancing. Those crossbowmen are continuing to fire, but man, they're taking heavy concave fire from these peasants. So definitely some good stuff there. You can see the peasant blob in the front. I definitely kind of like this tactic a little bit. Just kind of, because these formations here, some powerful troops. You got some swordsmen, the Tattersouls, Sigmar Sons, and they're all going to kind of get caught up on these peasants. So you can see here, these guys are just going to lay the smackdown on these peasants. You can see it's just wild here. They're definitely not going to last long, but we'll see how it pans out for them, because the flagellants are very, very heavy duty combatants. But I also like this the focus of the Bretonnian player, just focusing down these Tattersouls, who are a very strong melee combatant unit, but again, with 0 armor, you're just going to take a beating from peasant bowman fire. So the frontline battle is engaging for the most part. You can see flagellants over here are going to engage, and they're going to tear those spearmen at arms apart when they get in there. The swordsmen will also trade somewhat evenly with the battle pilgrims, but I think the battle pilgrims will win out at the end of the day, because again, the swordsmen only have 28 weapon strength. They don't have that same frenzy mechanic, and they're going to probably get beaten up pretty good. So aside from that, it looks like the Bretonnian player, Soothsayer, is indeed keeping his Pegasus Knights in auxiliary, but he finally decides to move them. And you can see the Demogryph Knights, the Empire player, Viking Cat, is kind of just mirroring them. And I really, really like this tactic. A lot of times people are going to be very inclined to be really aggressive with Cav and, be riding them around the back after those missiles. But sometimes using them defensively is the best bet. And you can see he forms a defensive line right here. I really, really like that play. And also the handgunners get a few decent volleys, but nothing terribly devastating to those Pegasus Knights. So you can see Boris Todbringer in here is fighting pretty aggressively. And it looks like the Lord. So it's not going to be like as strong as like a King Lewin, but he still is pretty good for cycle charging. But Boris is very, very apt at taking those type of attacks, and you can see that handgunner fire. So like I was saying earlier, the handgunner fire is going to be extremely efficient at pressuring the Bretonnian lords and the flying goon squad and keeping them at bay, and also using these Demogryph Knights is going to be pretty solid in a defensive capacity as well. The one issue with that is I think the Bretonnian player has a better infantry line, but still he decides to charge in here with these Demogryph Knights. He's going to kind of run into some of these battle pilgrims, and this is going to be a pretty good little trade here. Granted, there are some halberds over here, so it's a little bit dicey. He definitely doesn't want to get him kind of tangled up with these guys, but on that same coin, the issue with that is now the Pegasus Knights, they can collapse. So if he pulls the Pegasus Knights like up and around and flanks these guys and then kind of sandwiches them with the spears, that could have been pretty good, but it looks like a little bit of a missed opportunity there. Granted, it may have been a bad choice at the end of the day. I'm just kind of doing some wild speculation there. So over here, it looks like the Lord, the Bretonnian Lord, is kind of diving in on some of these spearmen who did penetrate the front line, and they do get terrified, and even these spearmen at arms should have no problem kind of chasing them off at this point. Over here in the front line, it looks like Lore of Life going off for both sides. So these flagellants are putting up a pretty wild fight in here. Definitely going fisticuffs with kind of battle pilgrims who are basically their Bretonnian equivalent, both kind of religious fanatics. Again, these guys, the Sigmar guys, are a little bit more fanatical. Granted, they are completely unbreakable. And you can see there's some karate kicks going on. Definitely some fun stuff all around. But if we go ahead and take an overarching look, it looks like some of the Knights of the Realm were able to kind of penetrate and get in on some of these crossbowmen. Granted, they do get sandwiched by some spears, but the spears actually break, even though they still have 46 models. Granted, they are a low leadership unit. So the Knights of the Realm at 22 models and are definitely doing a very good job. And you can also see now that this back line, what the Empire player ended up doing was moving up some of the spears to protect these guys, but it did leave this mortar vulnerable. So you can see these Pegasus Knights just come in and absolutely monkey slam this mortar back here. So definitely some wild stuff. The mortar crew though, guys, there's still a lot of them. They're going to run back up to the hills, but they may come back, and it's a very, very easy thing to forget. Oftentimes, I do that myself. There will be an artillery crew like sitting back there for like a good 5 minutes. But over here, you can see that the Bretonnian Lord is doing a very, very good job, and the Bretonnian player is also pulling back some of his peasant bowmen, kind of reforming his battle lines. But the Demogryph Knight's doing a pretty good job, kind of just harassing in here. And the Royal Altdorf Griffites, they do cause terror, which is incredibly strong. So they're just pushing back, trying to deal with all these missiles, but they're kind of getting like mucked down by some of these battle pilgrims. And look at these guys. They have 34, 33 models left. They're in very, very bad shape, and they're still fighting, you know, unlike those spears. Just a testament to the leadership, but they do get terrified here. And another thing, man, Boris Todbringer has just been an absolute boss. He's just been sitting in the front line with this Jade Wizard just putting up a huge fight, and you can see there's just a pile of bodies around him. Let's see how many kills. He actually only has 11 kills, but still, he's just been in here kind of turning the tide of this battle and pushing back those battle pilgrims. So very, very cool use of the Foot Lord. You don't see that terribly often, but in the backline, this is where the real epicenter of the battle is. You can see these Demogryph Knights have pushed back. They are wavering actually, but they do get a bit of a they do get an upgraded Earthblood. My tongue got like caught in my mouth there for a second. But anyways, the Bretonnian Lord does land. He uses his Potion of Toughness because, again, these Royal Pegasus Knights, or excuse me, these Demogryph Knights do have an anti-large bonus as well as very heavy armor piercing. So they're going to be very, very effective at kind of taking down, you know, a traditional Bretonnian Lord. But the Bretonnian player does bring back his Men-at-Arms with polearms, and they're kind of inundating some of these I keep calling them Pegasus Knights, but they are Demogryph Knights. So he's actually wrapping up these Demogryph Knights and doing a very, very good job of trapping them. You can see they got them surrounded right here, and every one of these models lost for these Demogryph Knights is a huge financial loss here, especially when you compare it to the losses that the Spearmen at Arms here are taking. So very, very good stuff. And you can see the Royal Pegasus Knights are sitting above, but they do charge in when the Demogryph Knights are retreating, and are definitely doing a very, very good job of kind of keeping them in check here. So in the back line, it looks like Boris Todbringer and the boys do come up to support, because again, this is a very, very essential part of the battle here. Boris himself is kind of engaged with some battle pilgrims. The Royal Pegasus Knights have jumped on Demogryph Knights, who are, you know, starting to get a little bit beat up here. You can see, the Royal Altdorf Griffites are down to 13 models, and they have a very, very low amount of HP left. But these other Demogryph Knights come back in, and you can see the Bretonnian Lord does come and get a little bit of a charge on Boris, who, when you put him on foot, doesn't have as much AP, but you can see some good handgunner fire. You know, even after this very atrocious battle, these handgunners are still continuing to just shoot and fight. Probably don't have the most kills because they were focusing on heavy armor, but still doing a very, very good job. So if we look in here, it's just a very pitched battle. So you can see Boris Todbringer and these Demogryph Knights are kind of working on the Bretonnian Lord, who has already used his Potion of Toughness. And you can see down the hill, the Bretonnian forces do have some battle pilgrims as well as some spears, who are kind of surrounding some of these Demogryph Knights as well. So over here, just an absolutely wild fight. You can see over here, the Bretonnian infantry are kind of overwhelming these Demogryph Knights. It looks like another Lore of Life ability going down, but it does look like it is indeed for the Bretonnian player. But that Bretonnian Lord does take some heavy fire, and those Demogryph Knights are able to focus them down, but not for free. The Demogryph Knights are down to 12 models. They're almost near their healing cap, and the Royal Altdorf Griffites have essentially been crushed off the battlefield. They only have 600 HP. They're at about 7 leadership, and they're definitely in some very, very bad shape. So a pretty wild fight. You can see the Royal Pegasus Knights are still in decent shape. 12 models here is going to be absolutely game-breaking for sure. I mean, that's a lot of punch you have, and there's kind of a lot of isolated troops. If you look here, you can see some of these crossbowmen over here. These handgunners are kind of isolated, and there's definitely a lot of fruit for the picking over there. So in the back line, the Bretonnian player kind of is regrouping. They did have some Sigmar Sons over in the back line, kind of pressuring the missiles, so very, very well played by Soothsayer here, bringing this Lord back, as well as these Royal Pegasus Knights to kind of come in and clean up, because in doing that, he's going to resecure his firing line back here, and he can just start shooting into this very, very tattered Empire front line. But the Empire player still does have some troops. He has some Demogryph Knights with Halberd, about 11 models there. He's got 28 handgunners here, and it looks like he does have 66, essentially a full group of crossbowmen here. So definitely a very, very wild fight. You can see the mortar crew is still up in the hills, and they have come back, so hopefully he does kind of bring them back to the battle. And it looks like they are starting to work their way back down, or no, they actually are not. And also, this is pretty funny. There's just some random peasants like hiding up in the hills. Sorry to take away from the battle, but I thought this was pretty ridiculous. They're just kind of hanging out there. And the mortar crew is coming back, and that could make a big, big difference, because again, the Bretonnian player does have a ton of low-tier troops left. He still has some peasant bows over here, but again, a huge threat from these Royal Pegasus Knights, who are healing up the Lore of Life right now. And it looks like they do kind of see the threat over there and are going to go and do the dirty. So over here, it looks like the Empire player is having to fall back because the battle pilgrims and some of those other troops did push them back, but very, very atrocious. The men-at-arms with polearms are having to fall back as well, so the entire front line is just kind of a bit of a wash. Both of the forces are just extremely tattered. The balance of power is very, very even. I would say it may be slightly favoring the Bretonnian player. As far as the troop count goes, Bretonnia looks like it has 571 troops against the 220 of the Empire player. Granted, the Empire still does have the Royal Altdorf Griffites, who, you know, still do have quite a bit of healing to go, but as far as the models left, it looks like, what do they have, 5 models? Looks like these Demogryph Knights have 9 models, so very, very tattered, but also that was a very, very nice Earthblood right there, because again, it hit pretty much all of these troops. He does have, it looks like, some spearmen, about 38 models coming back. He has 14 over here, and the mortar crew is back online, guys. So these guys are going to start shooting again. You can see they're turning around those mortars after taking that horrible beating earlier. And they're going to probably start shooting into some of these Bretonnian player forces, which is going to be very, very strong. A bit of a misplay here. He does send these handgunners up, who are taking huge kind of a concave fire from these peasant bowmen over here. And they still have about 60 models and about 40% of their ammunition, but you can see the mortars making excellent contact right here. Definitely going to be very, very good. And you can see the peasant bowmen, when they do get attacked by artillery, are going to take a pretty big leadership hit, because being attacked by artillery in general, on top of them already having poor leadership, does cause an additional leadership hit. I think it's like 4 or 6 or something like that, so pretty strong. So Boris is actually pretty close to his healing cap as well, if I'm not mistaken, or actually maybe he's not. I don't know if he is. Well, actually, let's go ahead and check and see how close Boris is to his healing cap. So we're going to check here. He still has 900 HP to heal, and again, out of a 3000 HP pool, that is pretty significant, guys. So the handgunners are kind of getting pushed back a little bit. You can see the crossbowmen are completely out of ammunition. They do have 24 weapon strength, so honestly, if you look at some of the peasant bowmen, they actually have 22 weapon strength, so pretty even trade there. Crossbowmen do have 20 armor, and let's see what the armor is on peasant bowmen. You never thought that you would be like looking at the armor of these units as if it would matter, but in this situation, when ammunition is running low, it might actually matter. So the Empire player is having to fall back. Again, he is very, very tattered, and he's out of ammunition, except for this group of crossbowmen who do have 16 ammo, and the peasant bowman line has a ton of ammunition left. They have about 40 or 50% on all of their peasant bows, and should be able to outtrade these very immobile Empire forces who are very, very injured. The only mobile forces he really has that can kind of contest and, harass the back line here are some really, really injured Demogryph Knights, but still, he has that Lord up there who's about 50% HP. He has Royal Pegasus Knights, halberds, and spears kind of littering the entire battlefield back here. So very, very tough stuff. You can see the Empire player is kind of just doing a last stand Braveheart charge right here. Boris is definitely yelling freedom as he gets in here. He's hopefully he doesn't have the same fate as William Wallace, but he's getting in there. You can see the peasant bowman fire is kind of whittling down this very, very healthy group of spears. Well, quote unquote healthy, but at this point in the battle, these guys would be considered healthy, but still huge HP damage. Their leadership is teetering between 13 and 0 essentially. So if they can get in there, they'll trade somewhat effectively, but still, it's going to be a very, very desperate last stand here. So you can see the Demogryph Knights are kind of following up the infantry corps, which I definitely like, and they're going to try and push off some of these peasant bowmen here, but the Bretonnian player does have some men-at-arms with polearms, the armor-piercing, anti-large troops who are going to be just an absolutely hard counter to these Royal Altdorf Griffites. You can see those mortars are still actually shooting in there, but they're about to run out of ammunition and have taken quite a bit of damage themselves. So unfortunately, these men-at-arms do get a little bit of a wrap here. Actually, I thought those were Demogryph Knights, but the Empire, or the Bretonnian Lord, does dive in, and he's going very, very aggressively after Boris Todbringer, which might not have been the best choice because Boris is very, very resilient with a lot of self-healing, but those Empire infantry just rout off immediately, leaving the Empire leadership just surrounded by men-at-arms with polearms, and it's a pretty tough situation. So the Bretonnian player does pull back his Royal Pegasus Knights, and guys, this in the pinch here, and that was a nice mortar shot. That's going to do huge damage, and you can see they're actually shaken from that. But the Bretonnian player has these Royal Pegasus Knights, 12 models left. That's tons of damage, and guys, they are not tired at all. They're completely fresh going against some very, very tired Royal Altdorf Griffites, so they get a great charge in there, and definitely probably going to rout these guys off pretty quickly. You can see they're taking some huge HP damage, and their leadership is starting to tank rather quickly. So they charge in there with the Bretonnian Lord, who also gets in there. So the Royal Altdorf Griffites are immediately taken down to 3 models, and are most likely going to, essentially break here. They do get an Earthblood, but it's too little too late. And honestly, they had too little models to really benefit from that at that point. You can see Boris Todbringer does push up here. He's doing a desperate last stand to support some of these guys, but he's also taking some crossfire from some of these peasant bowmen. So this is a bit of a combination of Braveheart, The Last Samurai, some of these Empire troops kind of running in and just getting gunned down as they come in. But you can see these crossbowmen here, still 64 models of combatants, so it could be worse. But again, they're facing down Royal Pegasus Knights and a somewhat healthy, firing line from the Bretonnian player. So in the back, he does have 66 models here. It looks like 40 here as well as 34. Some of his infantry though are routing off, and honestly the Bretonnian player doesn't really have any infantry left. He mainly just has peasant bowmen, so fighting in the trees here on these odd slopes is definitely a good choice. But the cycle charging from the Pegasus Knights and the Bretonnian Lord is pretty much going to be impossible for Boris Todbringer to deal with, because cycle charging, if you're really effective at doing it, especially with like a Bretonnian Lord, you can just essentially disable Boris. The one advantage that Boris does have for himself is he's kind of like congested in a pocket here, fighting. So he's going to be a little bit harder to isolate and charge. A lot of times, like if, the Bretonnian Lord charges in here, he's not going to make like square contact with Boris, and he might like get caught up on some of his own models or other troops like that. And you can see these Royal Pegasus Knights just running over this Jade Wizard, who is indeed shaken. So very, very tough stuff, but man, Boris is just an absolute trooper, just fighting in here, just being the true Todd, having a good time. But, he's down to 30 leadership. His healing cap is almost there, and he's surrounded by, some heavy hitters, Pegasus Knights as well as a Bretonnian Lord. And the Empire doesn't really have any supporting troops. They do have some of these crossbows in here who are kind of going fisticuffs with these men-at-arms with polearms, who actually only have 23 weapon strength. So as far as like pure trading goes, the crossbowmen are actually like not going to trade too terribly with these guys, which is pretty funny. So they're actually able to break them, which is pretty hilarious. But Boris is still, just taking those cycle charges, just horrible. He's getting knocked around, taking some serious damage. He's steady though, so he was able to recoup some of his leadership. And you can see these crossbowmen are actually pushing in here. So a lot of the Bretonnian infantry are actually routing, but unfortunately these Royal Pegasus Knights are just going to come in here and absolutely stomp these crossbowmen. So you can see they're just getting speared, decapitated, all kinds of fun stuff. And the Bretonnian Lord is still confident despite all this. So the balance of power is definitely going very, very heavy in the Bretonnian player's favor at this point. Boris, though, is definitely not giving up. He's actually somehow, some way back up to being confident, despite the horrible circumstances of this battle. And these crossbowmen are shaken. And as far as the rest of his army goes, he looks like he has some mortars back here who are out of ammunition. The rest of his spears and other troops are indeed shattered. And you can see he just has this Jade Wizard and these crossbows here. But the Bretonnian missiles, some of them are actually running out of ammunition. But these Pegasus Knights are still eager. They're still in great shape here. So it's going to be very, very tough to come back from that at this point. Over here, these peasants, they're not really going to be like terribly cost effective at firing in, because they're probably going to do more friendly damage than they would do damage against like a unit like Boris Todbringers. But still, it looks like he did kind of halt their firing, either that or they are obstructed. But some more cycle charging coming in here. It's going to be very, very tough. And very, very good performance from both players. That was just a wild back and forth fight. And something that I really liked was the fact that he was able to make Boris work so incredibly well without him being on a mount. Because again, he got like, that does like make him, I guess, a bit of a harder target, but on that same coin, it's like hard to maneuver around. But I would have liked to have seen Boris like on a mount, like running around with the Demogryph Knights to really like give them that extra punch and like that support. I think that would have been good. But granted, the way he played worked out as well. But something, I guess, just a topical observation is that the Bretonnian infantry line was a little bit more effective. The Flagellants seemed to take like a ton of missile fire from those peasant bowmen and just kind of got cut down. Even though the Tattersall still racked up 145 kills, a lot of those were against the peasant blob that you guys saw in the beginning. So, but yeah, great fight between, I don't even know how you would say this, but Flaxton Soothsayer and Viking Cat 91. That was super fun. So this was actually quite a long series. I believe there was 4 games total in the series. So I'll be casting the entire series, the finals from this one. So again, guys, stay tuned. Thank you all for your perpetual support. And then again, thank you to Shetland Apache for sending me these replays. It's definitely an honor to cast these. Puts on a great show. So thanks again for watching, guys. More content coming soon, and have an excellent night.